Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
Thanks, Kelly. Hello, Westcity. How are we? As you all know, we talk about communion every week, and I think by now it's pretty well established that something we all associate with communion is the idea of community. I've been reflecting on the idea of community separate from the idea of church, and how us as humans, we intrinsically desire community in our lives. We long for the connection to other humans with similar lives and experiences. We long to be supported in good times and bad, and we long to share joy with others. Now, I want to share a story with you, and I promise it's intended to be light-hearted, even if it seems slightly traumatic, but she'll be right. Basically, from the ages of 6 to 12 years old, every school holidays, 2 to 3 times a week, I would go to Narcotics and Alcoholic Anonymous with my biological dad. Now, the joke in my family is that I have always been 30 years old, even from the age of 6, and the idea of me as a 6-year-old fully thinking I was the intended audience of these meetings is hilarious to me. Now, I had no idea what a drug addict was, let alone that my dad was one, but I do remember how much I loved going to these meetings. This, in part, I'm sure, was due to the fact that my dad's friends, Big Al and Julia, would always take me to get ice cream when it was my dad's turn to speak. But a larger part, and the part I remember most, was how I loved at the end when we, yes, me included, will all hold hands, say the 12 steps and the serenity prayer. I would love standing next to my dad and some stranger squeezing my hand while everyone swung their arms and smiled to the people across the room, saying the steps and trying to shake off the trauma that they had just spoken about and that I was completely oblivious to. The serenity prayer in itself is beautiful and something that I still like to say today and hopefully understand a bit better now. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, this was my dad's community that wholly welcomed me and my brother into the folds. You can imagine addicts where you were surrounded by people in the drug world with dealers and buyers and users, forming friendships and connections, to then trying to get sober and feeling like you're now missing that community despite the ill health connection they had. NA and AA served to fill that gap for my dad and led him to several years of sobriety. The benefit of having his friends cheering him on when he reached milestones with tokens and cakes, someone to check in on him when he was struggling, and of course, to express love and joy towards his children. In hindsight, this was my first experience of community. Of course, you find community connections throughout your life. I play netball now and have done since 14. I was a girl guide beyond the age of acceptability. I used to run a book club at one of my jobs before I was a nurse. And then, of course, youth group, which led me to my faith and joining church, and then, of course, Westcity. Now, if church is just another form of community, what's the problem with just sticking with netball? All these communities I had still fed my soul, but they are conditional. To be in NA or AA, you need to be an addict or sober or a child. To play netball, you need to have some form of functioning knees and ankles. You have to read the book to stay in book club. You have to be of youth age to stay in youth group. And to do girl guides, you probably have to be a bit of a nerd. What is different about church, and I personally find extra unique in Westcity, is that you are welcome at the table with no conditions, no matter your experience, abilities, differences, or colour. As said in Galatians 3:28, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. So, you take the bread and the wine or juice, and it is a physical representation of the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross to allow us to come together as a community.
Awesome. Thank you, team. How good is the music this morning? I certainly appreciate it. Thank you, guys. I in all honesty, don't even want to go through half of what I've sort of got here, to be honest. One, just for sake of time, obviously. But two, I just feel like there's been so much already that we've heard that has just been such a blessing. And without trying to add too much onto it, I'll try and keep it pretty short and sweet for this morning. As we've heard from Kelly, as we've got to hear from Barb, this month is about giving. This month is about generosity. A generous life is what we've called the series. For those that may not have been here, so the first week, 2 weeks ago, Phil spoke, and he really sort of opened up the series quite well to discuss the topic, because when it comes to the topic of generosity and really the purpose behind this month, although we are taking up financial offerings, we want to try and discuss generosity in a more broad sense and what it means to be a generous person as a whole, which I think Phil really touched on. He obviously had invitational or relational generosity. And actually the phrase that sort of stuck with me the most after hearing him preach was, how can we resist building bigger barns and instead build bigger hearts? And that was really what I took from that for the rest of that week. And then Kelly last week, I was not here, but I did listen, and I actually thought it was quite cool, the three different sort of approaches we can take. We can either sort of be surfers or bankers, or we can be farmers. You know, you can either sort of surf the ebbs and flows of generosity as things come and go. You just sort of go with the flow. Or you can sort of approach it as a bit of a banker, where you're very transactional, very checking on the ins and outs, keeping track, keeping a log. Or we can approach it with the hope of a farmer that simply just plants a seed and waits in hope. And maybe when it comes to our generosity and being generous people, we should sort of take that lesson from the farmer. So this morning I continue that theme of generosity. My topic that I was given is generous service. How do we be generous, not just with our money, but with our efforts, with our energies, with our talents and our abilities? And in order sort of to explore that, I want to take a bit of a step further even and talk about the greatest resource that all of us possess. It's a resource that's far more valuable than money. It's a resource that usually slips through our fingers far too quickly, and before we know it, there's just not enough of it left. And it's a resource you can't save in the bank, and you can't generate interest on it. And it's a resource that once you've spent it, you can never get it back. I talk, of course, of time. We all have time. There's a lot of time that's been given to all of us. We can all be generous with our time, but how can we be generous with a resource that we know is running out, that we know that every minute that goes by, we'll never get it back? See, I think when it comes to time, it's easy to fall into the scarcity mentality. It's almost like the default. You know, when it comes to time, we actually sort of speak of it like it's money, or at least like it's a resource. You know, time is something that you can buy. You can buy time. You could probably try and buy time now and sort of improvise a bit and buy some time. We can spend time. We're all spending time one way or another. We'll save time. If you're ever on a road trip and you're sort of behind a real big caravan or something, you're trying to get ahead of it, you're trying to save some time on the trip. Maybe you find yourself with spare time. That's sort of how we talk about it, as a resource. And like I said, I think a scarcity mentality, it's my dilemma when it comes to time. See, I don't know about you, but for me, it always feels like there's far too much to do and never enough time to accomplish it all in. The clock's always ticking. Every minute that goes by is a minute I won't get back. And I know for a fact that my time will come to an end. How can I foster a mindset of abundance and of generosity when it comes to our time? I've chatted to this. I've sort of spoken about this to a few people in like friendship circles. But you know the question of like, if you could ever pick a superpower, what would the superpower be that you pick? And you sort of want to fly, or you'd want like super strength or something like that. And genuinely serious, the ones that I bring up, if I could pick two superpowers, one would be the ability to just never have to sleep. Like I don't have to need rest. And the second would just be like teleportation. So like just think of a place and you instantly teleport. And I say those things because for me, it's like, man, I would get so much of my life back if I didn't have to spend so much of it sleeping and sitting in a car or a bus or a train or whatever it was. If I could get all that time back, it's like a third of my life that I would get back by just having those two superpowers. That really speaks into, I guess, the mindset, or the scarcity mindset that I can so often fall into, and that so often traps me. And really, it's like the Ecclesiastes sort of model, right? Like you read it, it's the reality that we all live in, so it feels very natural to feel like time's slipping away, to feel like there's never enough of it, to sort of look back and just go, man, where did the time go? It feels like it's the default that we're all in. So how can we possibly generate an abundance mindset? What sort of a person would you have to be? What would you have to believe about life, the world around us, or about reality to sort of be a person that's able to just be generous with their time? Have you ever met those kinds of people where they just, doesn't matter how important they are or you think they are or whatever, they always have time for you. They would always sort of stop and have the conversation. Maybe you've even met people that are sort of the opposite and they're always just sort of rushing by and never really have time for much of anything. I think we know what type of people that we would want to be. Obviously, the passage, or a couple of passages that we've been sort of putting forward and really dwelling on these months is Philippians 2 and 1 Corinthians as well, but particularly in Philippians 2, which is what Phil sort of shared on in the first week. That to me really is the example. It's the Jesus example. And I'll just read it. It's a bit long, but it's so worth reading. And I know we've all heard it before, but again, if we can just stop and try and foster this kind of a mindset. It says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, and that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So that example is just so baffling to me because it's the eternal God who enters into this finite space and takes on that same feeling of time slipping away. And it actually seems remarkable to me that Jesus, he only needed sort of around 33 years of a lifespan to make the impact that he made. So often it's sort of, we can live our existences and sort of think, oh, I'll probably achieve that by the time I'm 40 or 50 or 60 or whatnot. And then, like we know, time slips away. We never truly achieve sort of what we wanted to achieve. And yet Jesus, in that sort of short 30 years, knew what he had to do, started his ministry. It only took him sort of 3 years of actually doing what he knew he was called to do to make the impact that he made. See, maybe it's not about how much time we actually get, but what we are doing with that time that we get. And we're to have that same mindset of Jesus where he valued others as greater than himself. He would have valued other people's time as more valuable than his time. I mean, man, he had stuff to do. He was on a mission. He still had time. He still had time for people, especially those that were down and out, especially those that the rest of society was saying, no, we don't have time for those people. Get those people away. They were exactly the people that he had all the time in the world for. So I have a dilemma of feeling that time scarcity. I also have a bit of a dilemma of being slightly introverted and loving my me time. So I can get really frustrated when I've sort of set myself up and I've got a good meal or a good book or a video I'm about to watch or something and, about to enjoy time for myself, and then it gets interrupted. so often I find myself feeling the frustration. My wife's laughing at me because she's probably felt it before. But, preparing this message really was challenging even for me to sort of think through, and it was actually really convicting. And even from now, it's still, as I go out the rest of this week, I'm sure I'm going to catch myself again and again when I'm at work or coming home. The amount of times I come home and Mahalia just wants to sort of greet me at the door, but my mind's already rushing to the next, bunch of things that I got to do, next thing I got to do. How do I foster the mindset where I just stop and I just appreciate the time that I do have? How do I consider other people more valuable than myself when I know that the one resource that is so great to me is always slipping away? So I usually think that the best way to spend my time is sort of on myself. It's so easy to sort of get into that mindset, right? The best way to spend your time is on yourself. How do we live lives where the best way to spend our time is on others? I have the same mindset as Christ Jesus had. He is our example. I actually have a bit of a funny story. I'm glad you're here this morning, Josh Fernandez, because it involves you. For those that wouldn't know, I've known Josh for a long time. I probably would have first met when I was like 10 or so. I was at his youth group when I was about sort of 12 years old, and there was a really funny story where he was going to drop me home, as they always did. It was 11 o'clock, midnight maybe. He's been on the band. He served all day, doing what he was doing. I was just some brat little 12-year-old kid. And my mum had rang me and she told me the address of where I was getting dropped off because she was at her boyfriend's house at the time. And then I completely forgot what she said over the phone. And then I couldn't get back in touch with her. So I'm in the car with Josh, and there was a few others that he still had to drop off. And we were basically just driving around endlessly. We didn't know where we were going. I gave him sort of a couple of street names that sounded right from my memory. We ended up in one suburb in Carramar, and that wasn't right. It ended up actually being all the way in Merriwa. So for however long it was, I don't even know how long, poor Josh was just driving around from street to street, from suburb to suburb, with no idea where we were going. And I remember it, and I could sense that he was getting annoyed, but he never expressed that. He never sort of expressed that annoyance towards me. And eventually we got there. Eventually he dropped me off, and it was all happy and smiles. And I was on my way, and then he would have gone about the rest of his night dropping other people off. But it's funny because I was 12, but that story still sticks with me. I still remember just thinking, wow, I was such a brat, and he was just so willing to just spend all that time. I mean, what a waste of time that was. But not for him. For him, it was that was his generous service. And as funny as it sounds, it's something so small like that probably at the time was frustrating and feeling like a waste of his time, but in reality actually made an impact that changed me, that as I got my license, there was many, many people that I drove around and dropped off. And he's actually not the only one. I had another good friend of mine when I was sort of 17, 18, and I lived with him. His name was Daniel. And he was radically generous with his time to the point where he would tell me, and I did it regularly, would wake him up early in the morning because he was like, no, come and wake me up and I'll drop you off to work. 5 a.m. or whatever hour it was in the morning, he insisted that you come and get me and I'll come and drop you there. So I've been super blessed by having some examples in my life of people that have just so generously and abundantly given of their time in such small ways. But that's the small seed that's planted there makes such an impact. And we can so go through our life, time just slipping by. We're so rushing to the next thing, that if we don't just stop and realize that even those small things, making someone a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, stopping to chat with someone on the side of the road, maybe it's at work, just talking to that person that you really didn't want to talk to that day, whatever it might end up being. For me, it might be coming home and just stopping and saying hello to my wife and giving her a hug before thinking about anything else or moving on to the next thing. It's using our time for the benefit of others. It's not being so caught up with this time slipping away that we have to try and gather as much of it for ourselves as we possibly can. It's living in such a way that we're just generous and we're happy to give it away. And we've always got time for people. I hope West City can be that type of community where people recognize, these guys, they've always got time. regardless of who you are, regardless of where you come from, your colour, your creed, your anything. You're welcome here at the table, and we have time for you. There's always time for you. I've actually always been struck by the foot washing passage in John 13, right, where Jesus washes the feet of his disciples. But it's always struck me with how John opens that passage up in that chapter. And the very first verse in John 13, he writes that Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world. So having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. It's like he paints this picture where it's because Jesus knows that his time's about to be up. Like Jesus knows the clock's ticking. You know, he was sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane because he knew that this dramatic moment, it's about to take place. He knew better than any of us that time it's limited and it's slipping away. So what do you do with it? Well, for Jesus, that was that time where he went, all right, it's time to get down and wash feet. That's the best use of his time that he could think of in those final hours, in those final moments. Really, to be a generous person, you have to be a little bit crazy in the world's eyes, I think. It's like Paul says in 1 Corinthians that the message of the cross is foolishness to those that are perishing, but those who are being saved, it's the power of God. The foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Because human wisdom and reality, when you're walking around and living your day-to-day, it'll tell you that time's running out and you don't have enough of it and you're never going to get it back. That's what human wisdom will tell you. But the wisdom of God is, no, you've got an abundance of time to give to those around you. And the best use of your time is used in service of others, valuing others as greater than yourself, valuing their time as greater than your time. I think that's pretty much good for me. I'm also struck in 1 Corinthians 15. It's a big chapter on the resurrection, right? Because really that's for me, and for us as Christians, we know that time won't just expire. We have a hope beyond the time that expires here on earth. And Paul sort of has this big chapter where he's talking about exactly that, the resurrection of the body, the resurrection that will come. And he finishes that chapter by saying, your labor in the Lord is not in vain. He has the hope beyond the grave, the hope of the resurrection, which inspires him to say that all those little acts of service, all that time that you thought was spent or wasted or gone that you're never going to get back, it's not in vain. The resurrection is the thing that redeems our time. It's the thing that we can look forward to and say, I might be allotted this small period of time now, but what I do with that time now is investing in the time to come. It's investing in the kingdom to come. See, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression living on borrowed time. We're all pretty familiar with that. It's basically the idea of like if you're maybe going through a serious cancer diagnosis or a car accident or something or other and you still sort of live after that event, people will say, oh, you're living on borrowed time. What I think the reality of the situation is, for me, this is how I want to live my life. All of my time is borrowed time. It's all just a gift that's been given to me. The time that I do have. The thing is, we don't know how much time we're going to have. Could be next week, could be next year, could be 60 years from now. But the time that I do have now, it's borrowed time. I'm on borrowed time. So what am I going to do with this time that I have? Am I going to hoard it for myself? Am I going to be scared that it's running out? Am I going to worry about how much of it was wasted? Or can I try and foster the mindset of Jesus that says, you are more valuable than me. If I can spend time on you, that's the best way that I can spend my time, not on myself, but on others. I believe I'm inviting Kelly up just before we do the communion, so I'll just end on a lovely little quote from a great movie called Kung Fu Panda, and it's Master Oogway in the first movie, where he says, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. Let's be generous with our time.
How good was that message? Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at Westcity, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.